there is a point in the mental golf journey where something begins to feel undeniable. Not dramatic, not magical, not a grand cinematic moment with slow motion clouds over the 18th green, although golf does enjoy a bit of theater. But something very real starts to happen when you begin the concentration thing. You begin to recognize yourself during the round. You notice the moment your tempo changes. You notice when your attention leaves the target. You notice when the body starts protecting the shot instead of allowing it to happen. You notice the exact moment where the round begins to pull you away from your own game. And that is not a small step. That is the beginning of real mental golf. Because now the game is no longer only giving you results, it is giving you information. And once you can see what is happening, you can begin to build something that changes how you respond to each trigger. Welcome to Fairway and Focus. Welcome to Fairway and Focus, a channel built to help golfers finally play closer to their real level on the course. Because many golfers already have more technique than they manage to use consistently during a round. And in golf as in life, the challenge is not avoiding interference, it is knowing what to do when it appears. Now, before we start, just a quick note. Yes, throughout these sessions, I will occasionally mention the tools and programs we created around this work. The first is called See the Shot, because everybody tells golfers to visualize, to breathe, to stay calm, but very few people explain how to actually use those tools properly. According to the kind of golfer you are and the kind of interference you experience on the course. And the second program is the Mental Golf Accelerator. That program is really about helping golfers build their own process, not copy someone else's routine, but create a personal system that protects their technique from the things that usually distract them during a round. You identify where your game normally starts drifting, and we help guide you step by step to build a more repeatable way back to your game to focus. Alright, now let's get into today's session. And don't forget, the most important thing in mental golf is not copying another golfer. It is understanding yourself. If you have already taken the first step into your mental game, you may be feeling something quite interesting now. You may not be playing perfect golf yet. Good. That would be deeply suspicious. But you may be noticing the moment before the mistake, the moment before the rushed putt. You may be noticing the moment before the forced swing, the moment before you try to impress someone who frankly may not even be watching properly. Very humbling, very golf. And this matters because for a long time many golfers experience their game as if it is happening to them. The round starts well, then something happens, something shifts. A mistake appears. A comment from another player lands badly. And or maybe the scorecard becomes too visible. A good player in the group hits a beautiful drive and you go nuts. And suddenly your swings start trying to audition for something. The body speeds up, the mind tightens, the target becomes less clear, and the golfer starts to think, why does this always happen? But now something different is beginning in your game. You are not only asking why, you are starting to see when it is going to happen. And that is a very different level of awareness. And when you feel psychological deepening, this is where the experience becomes important, because it is no longer just about receiving information. This is not data. It is about seeing your own game more clearly in real time. You are beginning to connect the outside moment with the inside reaction. You see the bad hole, but now you also see the urgency that comes after it. You see the short putt, but now you also see the extra tension that appears before the shot. You see the first tee, but now you also see the way your rhythm changes when people are watching. You see the water hazard, but now you also see how quickly your attention moves from target to consequence. That visibility gives you clarity, and clarity is where change begins. Not because everything is solved immediately, but because the old confusion starts to lose some of its power. The what-ifs begin to fade. What if I miss again? What if they notice? What if this ruins the round? What if I cannot recover from this mistake? These thoughts used to feel like instructions. Now they start to look more like noise, inner sabotaging voices. Useful noise sometimes, because it tells you where the interference usually begins, but still noise. And once you can recognize it as noise, you do not have to let it design the next shot. It's over. At first, this can feel slightly uncomfortable. Uncomfortable because the mind likes familiar behavior, even when that familiar behavior is not especially helpful. Golfers often know exactly how to ruin a round and they may not enjoy it. So I'm sorry, mind, let's go change something. Golf is actually very efficient in ruining our round. It usually ruins your round the same way every time. The rushed shot, the over-controlled putt, the angry club selection after a mistake. Well, it all happens. The silent walk back to the buggy where nobody says anything, but everyone knows a small internal storm is happening. And, well, golf is a charming sport. But let me tell you this. This is not bad news. It is not proof that you are somehow broken. It is proof that the interference is repeating. And if it is repeating, it can be recognized. And if it can be recognized, it can be anticipated. If it can be anticipated, it can be trained. This is the big turning point. Because the moment your reactions stop to surprise you, they stop controlling you in the same way. You stop feeling trapped by the same recurring moments, by your patterns, and you start recognizing them early enough to guide the round differently. And the decision point, after you know about mental golf. This is where the golfer reach a very personal decision point. Not dramatic, not loud, but significant. You begin to realize that the old way cannot carry you much further. The old way, just technical alone, is hoping you stay calm, hoping the swing behaves, hoping the round stays tidy, hoping confidence arrives at the right moment, wearing a smart blazer or carrying useful advice. Well, it doesn't work like that. It rarely does. The old way is trying to fix the mental game during the round, and it is not planning. If you don't have a plan, you plan to fail. Well, while the round is already happening, you can't fix it. While the scorecard is already speaking loudly, is not a good point to fix. And while your body is already halfway in the old reaction, you need a plan. That is not a plan. That is emergency improvisation. And emergency improvisation may occasionally work, but it is not consistency. You can't count on that. So now the decision becomes, while you continue reacting to what appears, or will you build a response before it appears? A plan, an anticipated plan. That is where your power starts to become visible, not as pressure, as intention. You are no longer simply reacting to uncertainty, you are beginning to respond to clarity, and that is a game changer. Are you prepared to receive the truth about your game? One of the most unexpected challenges in this stage is not seeing the truth. It is accepting it. Because sometimes golfers can recognize their pattern and still try to argue with it. No, I'm not rushing. Meanwhile, the putting shot has already left the station. No, I'm not trying to impress. Meanwhile, the driver has been grabbed with the energy of a man about to settle a personal matter. Or you say to yourself, no, I am perfectly calm, of course. The white knuckles on the grip are purely decorative. This is why recognition matters, because once the truth of the patterns becomes clear, the golfer has to stop negotiating with it. Not fight it, not dramatize it, not give it a name and build a whole personality around it. Simply stop obeying it. You can feel tension without letting tension design the whole shot. You can feel urgency without letting urgency choose the tempo. You can feel frustration without letting frustration choose the next club. Okay? That is not emotional perfection, that is trained perfection. And the first real shift as this awareness develops, your connection with your own game begins to feel at least different. Not perfect, but different. Communication with yourself becomes totally clear. Your body gives you signals earlier. Your tempo tells the truth. Your attention becomes easier to observe. You start to, notice when you are still with the shot and when you have quietly left your own game. And this is a very useful moment because the golfer who can recognize the shift earlier can also return earlier. You stop feeling lost inside the round and start feeling able to find the first useful step back to your game, to your focus, to your performance cues. That does not mean the round becomes easy. It means the round becomes readable. And the readable round is far easier to manage than a mysterious one. That is what is happening now. You are beginning to read your game. You are beginning to see the reactions, your own reactions. You are beginning to understand where your attention goes. And that is impressive. That is something that is a game changer. But it is still only the beginning. Recognition is not yet transformation. This part is important. Recognition is powerful, of course. Now you know what mental golf means. But recognition alone is not the full transformation. Seeing the patterns does not automatically change the pattern. It simply gives you the chance to change your response to it. That is where many golfers stop too early. They say, yes, I know. I rush under pressure. And you can also say, yes, I know. I overthink short putts. And what are you going to do about that? You also may say, yes, I know I lose focus after a bad hole. Good, that is useful. But knowing the pattern is not the same as having a process, as having a plan. A process is what turns recognition into repeatability. A process gives your attention somewhere reliable to go. Before the shot, after the mistake, during the difficult moment, when comparison appears, when the scorecard starts talking, sometimes it does, when one hole tries to take the whole round. That is why mental golf tools matter. That is why routines matter. And that is why a process matters even more. Tools help access focus. Routines help apply it. A process makes it repeatable. Why this could not have happened earlier? There is also something quite interesting about golf timing and mental golf learning. Many golfers only become ready for the mental game after they have suffered the same problem enough times. Very elegant, very expensive, very familiar. They have paid a lot for the lessons, changed clubs, worked on the swing, tried to stay calm, tried to think less, tried to think more, tried to just breathe, tried to visualize, tried not to look annoyed after missing a putt from 3 feet, a noble effort. But at some point they realize something important. The problem is not that they do not care. The problem is not that they do not practice. The problem is that they do not yet have a structure for what happens inside the round, inside your mind. That is why this moment matters, because now the question changes. Is no longer how do I stop this from happening? It becomes what do I do when this starts happening? That is a mature question. That is where process begins. As this awareness settles, a quieter understanding begins to appear. You do not need constant reassurance. You do not need to pretend every round is fine. You do not need to convince yourself that you are always confident. You simply begin to know your game better. You know where it drifts. You know where it rushes. You know where it tightens. You know where your game tries to recover too quickly. And also, you know where it starts performing for other people instead of executing the shot in front of you. And that knowledge becomes something very useful, not something to criticize, something to return to. Because once you know the pattern, your patterns, you can build the response, your routines. Once you build the response, you can train the return to your focus, return to your concentration zone. And once you train the return, you begin to protect your technique more often. That is how the mental game becomes practical, not theoretical, not dramatic, but practical. Now is where the real work begins. After the first recognition comes the next phase, integration. This is where what you notice stops being an interesting idea and starts becoming part of how you prepare. Not just something you think about after the round. Not just something you discuss in the clubhouse with the dramatic honesty and a coffee. Although that has its place, but integration means you begin to build the process around what you have seen. You take the moments where your game usually drifts and you design a response. If you rush, you need a rhythm return. If you overthink, you need a decision sequence. If you lose structure, usually, you need a focus cue. If you feel like you become too careful many times, you need a commitment trigger. If you collapse after a bad hole, you need a recovery routine before the next tee. This is where your mental game becomes organized. This is where it totally changes. And once it becomes organized, your reality on the course starts to really change. Not because golf becomes easier, I don't think it is going to happen, but because you become less surprised by yourself, less surprised by your patterns. With this new clarity, it becomes harder to hold on the old way of training, of playing. The old way was improvising mentally. The old way was hoping confidence would appear. The old way was blaming the swing for everything, and it is not true. The old way was collecting tips without building a structure. The old way was saying, I just need to relax. Well, it's a beautiful sentence, almost completely useless without a method, because relaxation does not arrive by command. Focus does not stay by accident. Confidence does not become repeatable through hope. There has to be a way back to focus zone. And once you begin to see that clearly, certain habits lose their appeal. You stop being interested in random advice, okay? You stop accepting that one hole should ruin everything. You stop treating your best shots as lucky moments. They are not. You trained a lot. You stop thinking your mental game is just personality. Not true. And you start seeing it as something trainable. That is when the real evolution begins. Are you up to that? What emerges through this process is not a new personality. You are not trying to become someone else. You are not trying to copy calmest golfers at the club who looks peaceful but may simply be very good at hiding inner chaos. You, by this method, are becoming more accurate about yourself, more aware, more prepared, more structured. your words change. Instead of saying, I always lose it after a mistake, you begin to say and to feel, this is where I need my recovery routine, and you implement it. Instead of saying, I cannot handle being watched, you are going to start to think and to feel, this is where I need my attention cue. Instead of saying I rush important shots, you begin to act like this is where rhythm must lead. That is a different golfer. Not a perfect golfer, a more prepared one, no doubt. And preparation is far more useful than pretending to be fearless. As you continue forward, you begin to step into a different version of your golf. Not because the challenges disappear. They will not, I'm sorry. The first tee will still be the first tee. Short putts will still occasionally behave like tiny legal exams. Water will still be water. The scorecard will still have opinions. But you meet these moments differently now. You are no longer navigating blindly. You are no longer waiting to see how turns up today. The range golfer or the course golfer. You are building a bridge between the driving range and the course. That is the true shift. Not just in performance, in access. Access to the technique you already have. Access to your best rhythm, to your best swings, to your best movements. Access to your decisions, to your commitment. This is getting access to your ability to return to focus when you get distracted. Because many golfers do not need a completely different game. They need better access to the game they already own. It's not all about technique. And that is exactly why we built Mental Golf Accelerator. Because once golfers begin recognizing their patterns, they usually realize something very important. They no longer need random motivation. They need a repeatable plan. See the Shot, one of our programs, helps with the tools. How to use focus, how to use visualization, how to use breathing techniques, how to use attention cues. And Mental Golf Accelerator, the other program we have, helps organize those tools into personal process. A GPS for your mental game. You identify where your game usually drifts and you understand the reactions that interrupt your execution. Then you build a repeatable way back and we guide you through that. Not copied from another golfer, not built on hope, not dependent on having a perfect day, but a process, a structure, a way to protect the technique you already have from the moments that usually pull it away. That is where consistency begins to become more realistic. That is where your best golf becomes easier to access. And that is where your next stage really begins. The unstoppable golfer. Sometimes the most important shift in golf is not discovering something new. It is finally understanding what has been happening all along. The rushed putt, the forced and leashed swing, the collapse after a mistake, the over-control when being watched, the quiet panic when the scorecard starts looking, well, interesting. Once you see it, you cannot really unsee it. And that is good, because the moment your pattern stops surprising you, they stop controlling you in the same way. You stop feeling trapped by recurring reactions, and you start recognizing them early enough to guide the round differently. What you are experiencing now that you start mental golf is recognition. That is impressive and is a totally game changer. But real transformation begins when recognition becomes a process, a reliable one. When you stop improvising mentally and start playing with a structure prepared before the round. That is when the game begins to feel different. Not easier, but different. Clearer, more stable. You will have consistency, more repeatable. And in golf, as in life, the challenge is not avoiding interference, is knowing what to do when it appears. So, if this message found you at the moment where your golf is starting to make more sense, stay with it. You may be at the beginning of a completely different way of playing golf. Welcome to the best golf of your life. And the next step is not to hope it continues. The next step is to build your personalized process.